We need bigger guns. This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you. I'm Matt.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Lisa. And this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. Today, we are wrapping up our Summer of Kaiju, this time with the infamous 1998 Godzilla.
Okay, so I am going to be starting us off with just a little bit of background about Godzilla 1998, and then I am going to give a few of my impressions and then pass it on to Lisa and Matt for their impressions. So we were trying to figure out some way to end our series on Kaiju. We thought about using Destroy All Monsters as the end, but then we all three, I think at some point in our discussions, had mentioned Godzilla 98. And we decided that would be a good way to end the series by revisiting that one. We also had an honorable mention for taking a look at Godzilla 1985, which is a movie that, as far as I know, I have not seen, but I've heard about it, which was kind of basically a questionable, I guess, American remake of a Japanese version of Godzilla from 1984. But now that we had talked about it, I'm looking forward to checking it out. It kind of sounds like the 80s version of what happened with the Americanization of the original Godzilla. But Godzilla 1998 is the movie we are talking about tonight. And I had forgotten that this was directed by Roland Emmerich, who also had co-wrote the screenplay with Dean Devlin. He, of course, is known for many movies, but especially for movies like Independence Day and The Day After Tomorrow. And I believe when we did our Summer of Disasters last summer, we mentioned Independence Day several times, and we did watch and do an episode on The Day After Tomorrow. So we are now revisiting Roland Emmerich and his take on Godzilla. People usually call this Godzilla 1998 or 98 just to distinguish it from other Godzilla films, but the title was just Godzilla. This was kind of a reimagining of Godzilla from the American side. I guess in some ways it was probably the first sustained effort at an American studio, TriStar Pictures. I believe Sony might have been involved, delving into Godzilla. Originally, they had talked about doing a trilogy. They did not. I think we can kind of be thankful that happened. And then, of course, right now, I think we mentioned this before, we're in the new kind of American series of Godzilla films from Legendary and Warner Brothers. So Roland Emmerich is the director. He worked on the screenplay. Toho had kind of given their blessing to trying this out. It's got a bunch of, this movie is so 90s. Sometimes I'm not even sure how to describe what I mean by that, but if you watch it, it's just like, this is the 90s. And there's all sorts of people who were major names in the 90s and obviously still recognizable. So it's starring Matthew Broderick, you have Jean Reno, Maria Pitillo, Hank Azaria, Kevin Dunn, Michael Lerner, Harry Shearer, etc., etc. And it did okay at the box office, but it was not a critical success, and it didn't do as well as they had hoped, which I guess is probably why it didn't get its sequel. And apparently, based on some of the stuff that we read about the film, Toho was not happy. And I'd heard this before, but apparently Toho thought they might be done with Godzilla, but part of the reason supposedly that they got back into making Godzilla movies is they wanted to make them correctly again. And apparently at the end of the 2000s series of Godzilla movies, one of the big bads that Godzilla has to fight is the monster from Godzilla 1998. I believe that takes place in Godzilla Final Wars. And so, yeah, apparently, I believe in one of the articles that we read, it said that one of the actors who had played Godzilla in the suit in various movies walked out of the premiere of 1998 because he said Godzilla had no spirit and it wasn't like the true monster. Now, Toho had apparently signed off on some of the changes that Emmerich wanted to make to Godzilla's look, but I guess once they saw it in the final product, it was disappointing to them. But that was kind of the reception of it. Also, I was reading Roger Ebert's review of the movie, and he talked a bit about how Emmerich did not like the way that Siskel and Ebert would react to his movies, and so the mayor in this movie is New York Mayor Ebert and his advisor Gene, who like to do thumbs up and thumbs down all the time. And we're basically parodies of Siskel and Ebert. And Ebert wrote, "They let us off lightly. I fully expected to be squished like a bug by Godzilla, but now that I've inspired a character in a Godzilla movie, all I really still desire is for several Ingmar Bergman characters to sit in a circle and read my reviews to one another in hushed tones." And then he goes on to basically skewer the movie. The very last line of his review is, "The primary audience for Godzilla is children and teenagers, and the filmmakers have given them a sterile exercise when they hungered for dreams," which I thought was pretty good description of whatever this is that this movie is. We also read an LA Times article where someone attempted to list all the plot holes in the movie, which God love them. It was a really tall order to be able to do that because this movie has so many plot holes. So many plot holes. I'm probably missing something in my description of this movie, kind of like the movie misses something in its plot. But I'll talk just a little bit about my impressions. The last time I watched this movie was actually in a movie theater with a whole bunch of people and my family. And we were watching the guys from the original MST3K in riff tracks, basically make fun of it. So I think that is an example of how this movie is kind of received by people. It was very fun and it was very funny. And watching it again, I have to say, just a few of my first impressions. I think we talked about this before we hit record, but I feel like, and I think you guys do too, it's way too long. This movie should not be over 2 hours. I just kept wondering if it was over, and then it kept going because I didn't remember that much about it from the last time I saw it. Other than that, I thought it was funny. Of course, the plot holes, we mentioned how it kind of becomes Jurassic Park at the end. And apparently there was like a kind of marketing war amongst different companies involving the people who made this movie, kind of poking fun at Jurassic Park, apparently. So I guess they were doing this tongue in cheek, but I don't know that it worked. My major issue with this movie, besides the fact that a lot of it doesn't make any sense, is I don't like the look of Godzilla. Godzilla just looks like a dinosaur. And I know they weren't going for the Toho people said they took the god out of Godzilla, and that's why they had to call it Zilla in their versions. But I kind of agree. In this movie, it's literally a iguana, I guess, that's mutated. And I recoil at this as a classic Godzilla fan, that Godzilla is just some mutated iguana. And while some of the monster's movements and running around chasing after people, I guess I could appreciate. I'm not going to say I appreciate the special effects because I'm not sure what was happening there. It's like, that's another movie. That's not Godzilla to me. And so that was annoying to me. And I know that they wanted to go for the fact that Godzilla could be defeated, but part of the allure of Godzilla, and the thing that people love about him, is that he is like this inexplicable monster that we can't quite handle. So I thought, to take Godzilla and make him a monster that it's not easy to kill him, but it's definitely doable, and he's an iguana, I just can't get over that. Or Komodo dragon, I don't know. I think in the LA Times article, they say it's unclear what he's supposed to even be. So I just feel like, other than the fact that you're like, hey, the Flatiron building just blew up and they blew the top off the Chrysler building, like, a lot of this film is just like, look, there's an actor that I know, or look, there's a building that got blown up. I don't really know that there's that much story here. I don't know. Lisa, Matt, tell me your impressions of this.
Well, I guess I can jump in first here. I agree with you, Mel, on pretty much every count you've made so far. This movie falls flat tremendously in a number of ways, and it is extraordinarily dated. I did put a note in our Google Doc for this episode that this really is a constant parade of a 90s version of, hey, it's that guy. Because, I mean, the leading star is Matthew Broderick, who by 1998 was not a blockbuster sort of actor. I mean, Ferris Bueller was in the 80s and his star was already beginning to kind of wane. So that's interesting casting. But then, I mean, you've got two Simpsons veterans, Hank Azaria and Harry Shearer. Hank Azaria playing a semi-big role. And then from there, it just goes further and further down the rabbit hole of, if you've seen a bunch of movies from the 90s, or if you're like us, grew up in the 90s, you'll just recognize people and go, that guy, I don't know his name, but he's been in stuff. All that aside, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, and there's a reason why, apparently. And I went into this just knowing that I didn't like it the last time I saw it, but thinking, well, it can't be as bad as I remembered. And it really is. Like, it's just not good. And it's almost 2.5 hours. It's like 218 minutes, I think. And we were talking before we started the actual recording of this episode, and I mentioned that at one point while I was watching this, I had to pause it so I could go to the bathroom. And I was thinking to myself, oh, well, I mean, there's probably only about 20, 30 minutes left. No, there was over an hour left. And I thought, what can they do with an hour left? Like, I didn't know how they would fill the time. And I don't think they did either. I mean, the plot just sort of jumps around. And yeah, it really feels like they were trying to take Roland Emmerich's Independence Day and kind of mash it together with Jurassic Park, and it does neither one of those things very well, and it's just kind of a mess. And that is my overall opinion there.
Yeah, this is one of those movies that, okay, this is what I'll say about it. Everybody talks about this movie being the bad movie. You know, when you talk about Godzilla movies or kaiju movies in general, this is the one that people pinpoint as like, this is their favorite to say, oh, I hated that movie. Or even if you ask them what was the worst movie you've seen in theaters, like what was your worst movie going experience? I feel like a lot of the times people say Godzilla 98. So already I wasn't like super excited to sit down and watch this again. I remember seeing it in the theaters, but I will be completely honest with you here. I don't remember a single thing from when I saw it the first time, other than Godzilla was like tearing up New York City. That's all I remembered. I couldn't even tell you who is in it. It just did not stick anywhere in my brain. I remember not liking it. I remember just kind of being like, well, that was not good. But I could not tell you, like, if you had asked me prior to this rewatch what I didn't like about it, I honestly could not tell you. The funny thing is I just watched this again, and I can already tell you this is not going to stick in my head. When you ask me next week what I thought of Godzilla 98, I will tell you I remember nothing. The only reason I remember anything from this is because I wrote notes, and I can look at my notes. I mean, I had no recollection that Matthew Broderick was like the star of it. I was shocked when he walked out. I was like, oh, he's in this. Okay. Yeah, I had all of the people that you've named, Matt. I love what you were talking about, saying like it's the 90s version of, oh, hey, it's that guy, because that's exactly what it is. But if I was going to pinpoint something about this movie right now that made it, because I don't know if I could tell you why I didn't enjoy it. It was too long. I think for me, the thing is that it didn't know what kind of movie it wanted to be. We've watched so many different kaiju movies this summer, and every single one of them has certain like touchstones that make it a kaiju movie, right? Because we've talked about that over the course of this summer. You know, is it kaiju? If it's, you know, what makes something kaiju? And technically this has all of the elements, right? It's got Godzilla. Godzilla was created by some sort of like radiation. And, you know, there's mention of like countries doing bombing stuff. The reason I'm using like really vague terms is because the movie is super vague about a lot of this. It's either that or I just wasn't paying attention. I don't know. But you know, there's mentions of that. There's, you know, the monster destroying the city. There's a brief mention that like humans are to blame for what happened here. That's very, very brief. That element is so much stronger, I think, in other kaiju movies. So like it's like technically you're watching this movie and you're like, technically, this is a kaiju movie. But it's also trying to be a million and one other things. Sometimes, one thing I was baffled by that I didn't remember from the first time is all the really, really dumb jokes throughout the course of the movie. And I was watching it and I was like, okay, was that supposed to land a laugh? Because it's a really like odd line. And I'm thinking, was that meant to be funny? Or is it meant to be kind of like that funny, ironic, like we're trying to make this like a B movie, because there are so many of those great like B movies that involve, like an old sci-fi, something you'd watch on like the second billing of a Saturday matinee. And then I was like, well, is it trying to do that? Or is it just jokes written badly? Because most of them did not make me laugh. There were a few that I thought, oh, okay, hey, that's kind of funny. But for the most part, like I didn't understand what they were doing. And then I guess because it's Roland Emmerich, I kept seeing parts of his other films in this. So I kept thinking, oh, this really wants to be a disaster movie. And that made me think a couple of things. The first being that disaster movies and kaiju movies should be closely related, but they're really not. Because in a kaiju movie, there's often a feeling that the creature isn't being destructive to be like mean or anything. It's because it was awakened from its slumber, or like in the case of Mothra, we saw where Mothra was actually summoned to come and help. And so there's this sense of like, yes, there's disaster and you don't want to see people get hurt, but at the same time you're thinking, well, if they hadn't have done what they did in the first place, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. And in a disaster movie, something like Emmerich's The Day After Tomorrow, for instance, there isn't that sense. I mean, there kind of is, but I don't know. You feel for the victims a whole lot more in disaster movies because you see bad things happening and you're hoping that they survive to the end. In this one, I didn't know who I was supposed to connect with. Like, I guess I was supposed to connect with Matthew Broderick's character, because they built in the whole love story, which we can go into that later. That felt super weird and forced. There were like 4 scenes between them, and then they were supposed to like have this big like love swelling moment at the end. It was weird. Anyway, but yeah, it felt like at times it felt like a disaster movie, and then at times it felt almost like a creature feature, like Jurassic Park. But it didn't feel like a kaiju movie. And then I read, and I'm just curious to get your guys' thoughts on this. I read this on the IMDb page with their their trivia section. And this doesn't surprise me at all. But apparently Roland Emmerich was not the first director that was attached to this. Apparently the original director was, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Jan de Bont, who did The Haunting, the infamous 90s The Haunting. But then he also did like Twister, I think. But apparently de Bont was a huge fan of Godzilla and the Godzilla movies and was really excited to do it. But for some reason, he wasn't able to do the movie. I don't know. They don't explain why. But when Emmerich was brought on, he said that he only agreed to do it because he was promised he could do whatever he wanted with it. It was supposed to originally be a series of movies. That's why the ending like leaves that like last dinosaur baby alive. It's not even a dinosaur. Oh my gosh, I just slipped. They leave the last Godzilla baby alive because it was supposed to leave room for a sequel. So they told Emmerich, you can do whatever you want. But he admitted at some point that he didn't even like Godzilla. He didn't even like the original movie. So he was just like, oh, cool. They're going to let me direct this big budget, like potential disaster series. And that he was given, he was given permission to go do what you want, which makes a lot of sense when I watch this. Because I thinking back on it now, I'm like, oh, he really did want to make his disaster movies, and he just put Godzilla in the middle of it because that's what they were letting him make. I don't know. I'm curious to know if that rings true to you guys at all.
I had seen something about that in one of the articles I read. I can't remember which one now off the top of my head. And I have to say, no offense to Jan de Bont, but the first thing I thought was, if he had done it, would Godzilla make the tornado sounds? Because in The Haunting, the house does. So,
well, but also when we talked about Twister, the tornado makes dinosaur sounds, so it might fit Godzilla.
Oh, that's true. That is true. No, I would have loved, if he was a Godzilla fan and had a cool plan, I would have loved to have seen it. That was my first thought, and I put it out there because I don't like The Haunting, but I would have loved to have seen his treatment of it. And yeah, I did see something about how Emmerich was just kind of like meh about Godzilla, but for some reason wanted to do it. And your theory of this is a new type of disaster makes a lot of sense. And I can also see how if you have like a franchise with a lot of history, that, I don't know, it's a hard line to walk, because you would want to bring someone in who has like really interesting, cool new ideas, but you also don't want to alienate the fans of the thing that's existed for so long. So yeah, I really would have liked to have seen the other interpretation. I mean, I'm a Godzilla fan that likes the newer one, so I mean, I don't think it would have been too difficult to find someone kind of respectful of the tradition to make something that I'd at least be entertained by. I mean, I'm not looking for Shakespeare. I'm looking for a Godzilla movie. So yeah, I can see how that could be an issue. And I also get what you're saying about how this seems more like a movie that doesn't quite know what it is, but leaning toward disaster. Because I too would every now and then just think about the disaster movies that we watch, particularly like The Day After Tomorrow. I feel like I kind of equate kaiju movies a little bit more with disaster than maybe you are. I totally see where you're coming from, but like, I feel like the kaiju kind of represent disasters because you always have evacuation and you always have the political issues about who's going to get out and how you get people out. And you always have the flashbacks to things like tsunamis or war, things like that. But I feel like this is maybe a little bit too much reliant on it being disaster. And like you said, there's no reason for the disaster either. Like some country, possibly France, did some nuclear testing that turned this lizard into Godzilla. And one of the plot holes, the guy from the French secret police, whatever that is, acts like France has known about this because he says they came up to clean up the mess. But earlier, like, nobody knew about Godzilla, and how would he hide? And then why does he come to New York? Matthew Broderick says at one point that it's amazing he can like hide in the skyscrapers and use the subway to have babies, or I don't even know. There's no explanation. And also, why wouldn't he have just gone to a city closer to where he was near Polynesia? Like, there's no, like you said, I agree. We don't know who to sympathize with I actually sympathize with Godzilla toward the end of the movie because I was like, I don't even understand why they made him come here.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I agree with what you're both saying, that especially Mel, I am going to kind of lean more towards Lisa's statement of kind of the separation between disaster and kaiju movies in some sense, at least. And this really, yeah, I think does skew more towards disaster that just happens to be a giant monster. And especially if you look at Roland Emmerich's other movies. I mean, you did mention The Day After Tomorrow, which is a disaster movie. I would argue even Independence Day could fit that criteria, at least as a mashup of disaster and alien invasion, because Roland Emmerich really does seem to have a thing for blowing up cities, and especially monuments, be it the Chrysler Building or the White House or the Statue of Liberty or whatever. So yeah, it just completely felt like a movie that never completely knew what it was. And I'll be honest, I kind of feel the same way you do about a series of movies that has been around for so long, that has its kind of established mythology and whatnot. I'm fine with reimaginings or updatings or modernizations. but they have to serve a purpose. And the Godzilla monster that they made in this, I mean, it doesn't even vaguely resemble any previous incarnation of Godzilla. It really does look more like a Tyrannosaurus or something out of Jurassic Park, the way that it walks. It doesn't even feel like Godzilla, and there doesn't really seem to be a good explanation for why, other than, oh, it was an iguana, the French irradiated it, like you said already. And that's a good excuse to have Jean Reno in parts of the movie, I guess, as a French Secret Service agent, for what that's worth. It never quite figured out what it wanted to be, and in reimagining the character of Godzilla, or just the institution of Godzilla, it never established anything concrete or interesting about the character. Like in the first one, the first Godzilla movie that we watched way back at the beginning of the Summer of Godzilla, we talked about how, I mean, there was this previous lore of Godzilla amongst the locals in the island where he first appears. And aside from at the opening scene where he attacks a fishing boat, and you've got a Japanese sailor saying Gojira, and then a throwaway line about how he's a myth of a sea dragon that the Japanese talk about. That's it. And there's really no connective tissue. There's nothing. The media instantly latches on calling it Godzilla instead of Gojira. And I don't know. It's just all over the place. And before we get too far away to talking about plot holes, I just have to throw this out because I made a big note about this while I was watching this. Very early in the movie, Matthew Broderick's character is established as a scientist who's studying irradiation on earthworms in Chernobyl. And suddenly, somehow, throughout the movie, he becomes an expert on amphibians and lizards. He knows quite a bit about them, even though he's specialized in earthworms and studied earthworms in Chernobyl for 3 years at least. And here's my big quibble, and I just have to get this out, and then we can move on. When we first meet him, he's driving to Chernobyl to study the earthworms, and he is wearing no protective equipment whatsoever. He climbs out of his car and just starts luring the earthworms. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I just watched the Chernobyl miniseries on HBO a couple of months ago, and if he's been doing this for 3 years, he should be dying of cancer right now. So there we go. Sorry, just had to get that out.
I wondered about that as well.
I mean, I don't even think we have enough time to go through all the inconsistencies and things that made no sense in this movie.
Oh no, I agree. That was just the one, and maybe because it was at the so I was paying even closer attention. My attention hadn't waned, but I just saw that and was like, this guy should be dying in a hospice right now. He should have cancer and be dead.
Yeah. There was so much, I didn't understand. I know they said that, Godzilla traveled to New York to nest, but they said the only explanation they gave is that sometimes animals will go a long distance to reproduce. That made no sense. Why... that I didn't understand why New York. I didn't, this is one of the things that kind of got me. And this might have been, I'm going to harp on the humor a little bit of this movie because I didn't understand what was the intent. Some things were genuinely funny when so this was very 90s, but and I can't even remember her name now. Audrey, the would-be journalist who was Matthew Broderick's love interest in the movie. And she was trying to get ahead in work and she was being dismissed because she was a woman. And the only way she could get ahead is if she gave into her boss's advances. And, that was I don't know. I was like, oh yeah, this is the 90s. Sexual harassment in the workplace was, I guess, just expected. That was just oh, okay. She's trying to get ahead, but can't. But at one point when her boss was like standing in his office and he was trying to like get the big story ahead of the other guys, and he was, saying, I can't find my big story, as like Godzilla is walking behind him, and then he turns and misses it completely. And I did think that was kind of funny, because I was like, oh, that is a really funny gag. you know, I enjoyed that. Little things like the fact that they were mispronouncing Matthew Broderick's character's last name the whole time, and he kept having to correct them. I don't know. I always find things like that funny. So I was just like, okay, this is funny. But then I thought, and maybe this is because we watched a whole like summer of disaster movies last summer. Maybe it's because I feel like I've lived through enough disasters now. I just like evacuated because of Hurricane Ida and came back. And they were evacuating New York City. And at one point they showed, everybody in the streets, all the cars, they're honking the horns, people are running. This is when we see Godzilla, but then it switches and everybody's like in the subway. And suddenly it just seems like everybody was way too calm. And that was the thing that really struck me about this movie, is I was just like, our main characters are way too calm. Just way too calm. Like there was no sense of like, every once in a while in the wide shots, you'd see people panicking. Like all the extras were panicking. But then like our main characters, like Audrey was just concerned with getting the story out, right? Matthew Broderick's, what was his name? Dr. Nick. I can't remember. Yeah, Nick. He was just, I don't know what he was concerned about. But he was very calm through most of this movie, even as he was like buying all those pregnancy tests and stuff, which I don't think, and maybe I wasn't paying attention, I don't know why he needed to get the pregnancy test in the first place. But I don't know. Like, I just felt like the main characters in this movie were so calm, which was strange because that did not fit the previous kaiju movies we've seen, and that didn't fit a disaster movie either. Like, there was no sense of like that they thought they would get killed. It was all, everybody just had an agenda. Dr. Nick was just trying to prove that his like theory was right with it. And then Audrey was just trying to get her story. Hank Azaria, whatever his character's name is, was just trying to like get the shot on camera. And I still have no idea what the French guys were doing there, besides doing bad Elvis impressions. I don't know. There just did not seem to me to be the proper level of panic in our main characters. And that was odd to watch because the rest of the movie was like full on panic. And then we would cut into our main characters and I'm like, oh, okay, they're just like buying pregnancy tests and riding in the subway and stealing cards to get in places. I don't know. It was very, the tone of the movie was very disjointed to me. And I think the humor was throwing that off too, because they would be cracking jokes over things. And I was like, wait, is this supposed to be a funny moment? Because I feel like people should be panicking.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And I guess that's partially why we don't really know who to sympathize with, because I don't really feel like any of the characters were really deeply characterized enough for us to know truly what was making them tick. I mean, we even had other scientists, maybe, but I'm not 100% who they were, other than that one really thought Matthew Broderick's character was good looking, and the other guy liked her, I guess. There wasn't really a lot of motivation for the military people other than yelling about trying to kill Godzilla no matter what they were destroying. It was really weird. It was hard to know what people wanted. Even the mayor was like too cartoonishly drawn. I guess he was supposed to be making a caricature, but like he just wanted to bring everybody back the whole movie, even when a giant lizard was destroying everything. Like, I don't even know that Jaws' mayor would have thought that it was great to bring people back in that. It's I don't maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like that kind of stretches credulity to have someone, even a laughably buffoonish person who's incompetent, if you know that this huge monster is destroying your town, would try to bring people back. That's got old to me. That kind of joke or whatever it was. I don't know. Maybe O'Neill was scared enough, but his character wasn't really drawn out either. I felt like at the end when his commander said he was proud of him, we were supposed to care more than I did. Yeah, the only time the main character was really scared is when they were inside the cab, inside Godzilla's mouth, and still Matthew Broderick was just looking around to see what he could do to get them out. I mean, I would have been screaming like Jean Reno's character and Hank Azaria's character. So yeah, I guess it's because the characters were so flat they couldn't even react properly with fear, and that's sad. That is very sad.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell in places if it was bad acting, bad writing, bad directing, or what combination of those three at any one point, because there were definitely times where I think some of the humor that Lisa pointed out fell flat because of the delivery, and there were times when it fell flat because it was just badly written, and then the characters themselves not greatly directed. And like you said, Mel, why does Matthew Broderick not freak out when their cab is in the mouth of Godzilla? I mean, he's not a man who's trained in any sort of disaster anything. He's a scientist, and I'm not saying that should automatically make him, a scaredy cat or something like that. But I think just the natural human reaction to being in the mouth of a 20-story lizard that has been chasing you would be a terrifying experience for anyone involved. Full stop.
Yeah, yeah. It was bizarre, and I also felt that the movie, because it started the movie starts with bombings basically. Let me see what I wrote for my note. I don't even remember. Yeah, it opens with the shots of bombs. Then it shows the Japanese ship. Everybody's panicked. We see, I guess, Godzilla. We learn that there's one survivor who's like showing radiation. They've got the thing like beeping over him or something. And then we immediately go into like Dr. Nick's backstory. But I was like, this movie, I feel like starts at such a, like it starts at level 10. And you're like, if you start at a level 10, there's nowhere to go. And it weirdly tries to stay there the whole movie. And maybe that was adding to it too, because I don't know. They're just, I don't know. It just, it was all over the place, and yet it didn't go anywhere. It was global, but then it was also only New York that was really being affected. They tried to do, like, I guess, make a nod to, like, Godzilla movies of the past, with especially with Nick's character being, they made a throwaway comment that he used to be, so I think they said anti-nuke. And he says, well, I still am. I'm just able to make change because I'm working here. And I thought, okay, but then they don't really do anything with that. Like, we don't know if he actually is making change. And the only people that I felt like were really concerned about the fact that, like, humans' involvement with nuclear testing caused Godzilla were the French people who were there. I still don't know who they were. They were there to make amends, or like to try to fix what the problems their country had done in the past. But they were the only ones who really seemed concerned. I don't know, there just wasn't that like message, that same message of, oh, we need to be really careful of what we're playing with and what we're messing around with. It was like they threw the lines in there, just kind of like, oh yeah, this has to be a Godzilla movie, but it wasn't really in the movie, if that makes sense. Which was kind of surprising to me. If that felt really sloppy, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the movie became, let's watch the American military like blow up this lizard. The nuance was like completely lost, I felt like. And even the awe of the Godzilla movies was kind of lost too. Like when Matthew Broderick is watching him die. I don't know. Yeah, there were so many mixed messages in the movie. Like, I feel like in the original Godzilla, you have a little bit of sympathy for Godzilla because he came because of what the humans had been doing. And so the humans were having to face Godzilla, which is something they shouldn't have to face, but he was also affected by what they did. And there's kind of this tragedy at the end of it all the way around. And this one, I'm not sure what it is other than this creature was created by people who aren't taking responsibility for it and nobody's recognizing it. And then we just kill it. And then we all cheer at the end. And yeah, I feel like the other kaiju movies, even Destroy All Monsters, we could suss out an interesting overarching theme. And this one, I'm just not sure what that was.
The theme was a forgettable movie.
Ouch. But probably.
I mean, I have to admit, if this movie really had been what the last 30 minutes of this film was, which was Jurassic Park and Madison Square Garden, if this whole movie had been that, I think I might have enjoyed it. There was just so much in the beginning that I didn't enjoy, that I didn't understand what they were doing, that didn't tie together for me. Yeah, I really think if it had just been when they're discovering the eggs and kind of seeing the terror of these little lizard babies, these giant lizard babies waking up and hatching, I might have really enjoyed this movie. But as it was, I think it's no. Well, I mean, I really don't mean to be so negative on this movie. This was one of those films, and I haven't had this in a long time. I'm usually very easy to please. I don't expect much from movies. I want them to be entertaining. And this one, I kept checking the timestamp on my computer, thinking, oh, that scene had to have taken 10 minutes, and 2 minutes would have passed. It was just not what I wanted. Yeah, I really would not mind Jurassic Park dinosaur babies, in the middle of Manhattan. That would be a good movie. I will take that. But this as it is, no. And I have a sneaking suspicion my brain is not going to retain this information. So, I don't know. I imagine I will not be able to tell you exactly why I don't like this movie. And I hate that we didn't talk about plot hardly at all, because there is no plot. It's some loose threads, very loosely woven together, and Godzilla somehow became an iguana. I don't know. Well, I guess that is it for today. And you know what? This is a wrap. I hate that we ended Kaiju Summer on Godzilla 98, but that's a wrap on the Summer of Kaiju. We're going to be back soon. We're going to be starting season 6. We've got some really exciting things planned that have nothing to do with giant iguanas. So I'm excited for you guys to listen to that. We're at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram. We also have a Facebook page. Our email is nofearcast@gmail.com. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to exclusive content. Or simply rate and review us, which is entirely free, but it does help other listeners find us. The music is by Nicholas Gasparini. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.